Hello, and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. So last week I was talking a little bit about whether or not you think your karate techniques would work in the street. And I had a few ideas and a few comments come back to me on that. Most of them agreed with me. Not all of them, okay, but a lot of guys think that because they train really hard in the dojo and they win lots of competitions, that they think they can utilize what they have out there in a real confrontation. But as I explained last week, everything you do in the dojo is what if. It's basically, maybe this will happen and maybe that will happen. And if it does, then maybe you can do this and maybe you can do that. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a value of training. I mean, I've been training for 55 years, and there's a lot of value in it. As I said, there's a lot of variables come into play when the confrontation is real, as opposed to a scenario that's set up by your instructor in the dojo, or even in the competition ring, which is still a scenario because you have to fight to rules, and there's going to be a referee there, and if you go outside of the rules or you start moving outside the box, so to speak, then you're going to feel the consequences and probably get disqualified, or even worse, banned from competition. The other thing is, if you don't stay within the rules in a competition and you deliberately harm somebody, you can leave yourself open to charges of assault. And even worse, particularly if you're in the US, where they seem to sue everybody at the drop of a hat, and they get a lot of money for it. And you all heard about the woman who drank hot coffee at McDonald's and got millions of dollars because she was too dumb to figure out that the coffee's supposed to be hot. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, what I was saying, with the variables that come into play when you're in a confrontational sequence are a lot different than, say, just a competition. Now, we all do our Kion training, we do our kata training, and then we do our kumite training. Just keep in mind that they are all just training. There's lots of people say, never use hikite and all this. But the reason we use hikite, particularly in Kion training, is to get the body muscles used to coordination so that we can use the whole body behind the technique. Of course, say your arm muscles or your hand muscles, they're small muscles, but they're extremely fast. So small muscles tend to be faster. They don't take as much energy to move, and so they can move faster. So you want to try and coordinate, say, your hip muscle along with your arm muscles when you're punching, so that you can put mass behind the technique, because as you all know, mass times speed equals force, right? And that's what you're trying to put into your technique. This doesn't always happen. You can hit a makawara all day, and you can hit it as hard as you like until your knuckles bleed. The same with a punching bag. You can hit a punching bag hard. Unless you get to the point where it's almost second nature to hit that thing as hard as you can, it's not going to happen in a confrontational situation. In a confrontational situation, as I mentioned on the last podcast, adrenaline kicks in. Adrenaline is a wicked drug, and it's a hormone secreted by the adrenal gland. And it's a self-protection thing. You either fight or you run, fight or flight. This is what kicks in. But it kicks in to the extent that generally that you're overdosing it. So even if you're used to putting as much power as you can in your punches and, moving your body into the attack, you're only going to be able to use major muscle groups, because the adrenaline will restrict your fine motor functions, as well as your breathing and your vision and salivary glands and all the rest of it. It's going to use this self-protection technique to cut down on a lot of functions that you can use in, say, a dojo technique, like a locking technique, or something where you're going to need a little bit of fine motor skill, like dragging an arm over, pressing on the elbow, and that kind of stuff. Joint manipulation and pain compliance. You got to be really quick before your adrenaline kicks in, because that's not going to happen. Once the adrenaline kicks in, trying to do a joint manipulation becomes kind of awkward. You're restricted to the large muscle groups and making big movements, big, effective, heavy movements. The other thing about adrenaline, and those of you who have been in a situation where you've had to use something like that will find that it's extremely addictive. Now, I may have mentioned this last week or I may not, but I read a book years ago, and it was to do with hooliganism in sports. Now, I'm a football fan, and when I say football fan, I mean real football, where you kick the ball with your feet. It's self-explanatory, really. I don't really agree with the spandex and armour crowd. I don't know what they're doing. But anyway, football for me is where you kick the ball with your feet. Now, it got a bad rap around about the 70s and 80s because of this hooliganism. And there's still, in some countries, where they're not as, I won't say as educated or civilized, but there's some countries where the hooliganism is still a big thing. You hear about these ultra mobs or ultra firms in Eastern Europe. And, in the 70s and 80s, almost every football club had its own firm of fans. They call them firms. We call them gangs, hooligans, as they're better known as. And they weren't interested in the football. And it was quite obvious they weren't interested in the football. Most of the time, they'd have the backs to the pitch or the field where the play was going on, and they'd just be screaming and shouting at the other supporters, trying to wind them up. And there was always just as many nutters on each side to make it interesting. And they'd actually make arrangements to meet each other for these fights. And this book I read, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I have to have a look in my library. I've got a couple of thousand books here. I think it was called The Football Factory. And it was about West Ham, which is an English football club. They have this silly song that they sing, I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles. I don't know what it's got to do with football, but I know Liverpool have a good song as well, and, they all do. But anyway, theirs is I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles. But they had a firm, West Ham, and it was a hard firm, and that was, I think, the reputation that they tried to build up in all of these football hooligan crowds was to build up a reputation that there was a hard firm. Usually there was 3 or 4 people in it who would go crazy. The other football club that had a really bad reputation for hooliganism was Millwall, and probably the most famous Millwall player was Vinnie Jones, who went on to be some kind of movie star, but not a real good one. Basically played the same person on the screen as he did off it. But what this book showed me was the adrenaline that you get from being in that confrontation was addictive. And it wasn't so much addictive as it stayed with you. And as I may have mentioned last week, if I didn't, adrenaline, when you look at the adrenaline hormone, it comes on fast. You tend to overdose. But then it takes a while to lead off. So it bleeds off slowly. And you keep getting almost like reminiscence coming back. Like you refight, you redo the fight in your mind over and over and over again. And it's basically that edge or that high that you get from adrenaline that keeps these guys going. They remember what it felt like, how they were living on the edge for that time that they were in there, just, wailing on each other, throwing boots and kicks at everybody and headbutts. And this is what got them going. This is why they wanted more of the drug. It wasn't like something that gives you a lot of pleasure, say like sex or something like that. Unless you're in love or you're married and you're going to go on with it for years, it's pretty much over, right? But when you get into a fight, I guarantee you're probably going to go through that fight in your mind for at least 6 or 7 weeks. Thinking about it, it's going to keep coming back, and you'll remember the high. I know many years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was in a skydiving club. Now, this was when skydiving was absolutely brand new in the UK, and I was with the Territorial Army. I'd come out of the regular army after I'd done selection for SAS, and they gave me a job with the Territorial Army as a mechanic, which was, really good. And the guys there were... It was with 4th Para, so they were all parachutists. even part-time parachutists. Territorial Army is kind of like the National Guard in the US. So they're like weekend warriors, if you like. But they all enjoyed it, and being fourth para, they got to do jumps and all that. And they wanted to take it further because, as I say, you get the high. Now, with military jumps at that time, you jump from 600 feet and you had a full canopy straight away because you're on a static line. That is like a 12-foot web cord that just opened your chute for you. And before you knew it, you were on the ground. I mean, military idea is throw you out of a plane, get you on the ground as fast as you can so that you can get into action. So you only had 600 feet. And you did some of your early jumps from balloons, which weren't even 600 feet up. It's kind of scary. I mean, I'd rather jump out of a plane than a balloon. But anyway, the sports karate was overseen by the British Parachute Association, and I've still got my logbook for the British Parachute Association, and they said that you had to have a full canopy by 1,200 feet. So when you were doing these static jumps, you were jumping from 2,000 feet, 1,800, 2,000 feet, so that you had a full canopy by 1,200 feet. Now, the only canopies we were using at that time were the old-fashioned military canopies, but we'd cut pieces out of them in a pattern. So, we could kind of control them. What that did for you was it just gave you this amazing high. Now, you didn't realize it probably on your first two jumps because you're on a static line, and as I say, 1,200 feet, you maybe got 2-3 minutes hanging from your rig before you hit the ground. And then once you'd done your 5 or 6 static lines, you started to go up and you started to do your free fall. And at that time, we used a ripcord to open the rig. Nowadays, they just toss a drone, but they have much better canopies. So the first real bite, or the first time that the adrenaline really bites you when you're skydiving, is when you do your first free fall jump. Because if you don't open that canopy, it's not going to open. And so you got that in your mind, and then you're thinking about everything you want to do, and everything moves so fast. But believe it or not, your mind does catch up to the speed that your body is going. And this happens in kumite, and it also happens in street confrontations. Your mind will catch up to your body. Now, where we get a difference between somebody who can recognize the situation and act on it and somebody who doesn't is it's basically experience, but it's also being able to perceive what's going to happen and acting on it rather than, I'll see what he's going to do if I say this or he says that, and trying to defuse the situation. Most of the time, you're not going to diffuse anything, okay? As I mentioned, there's just some situations you can't diffuse because people are out to make the most of the situation, and they all believe that they're going to come off better than you. Otherwise, they just wouldn't do it, all right? That's why I always noticed when I was driving cabs and I had a gang of young guys in the back and I thought, going to be trouble, right? They were all rowdy and mouthy when there was 4 or 5 of them there. And then maybe you drop one off and they'd still be rowdy. You drop 2 off and they'd be a little quieter. By the time we had one guy left there, he was the nicest person in the world. These people just enjoy being in a gang, and they enjoy the camaraderie, the feeling of safety. They take that one step further into the feeling of bullying, and they use their numbers to try to intimidate. And the majority of them, it's just a bullying technique. And you find that a bully on his own is very rarely a bully. He nearly always has to have an audience or people to back him. So once you perceive that, once you know that, you can use it. So if you can take a bully out real quick, his audience aren't going to be that bothered. They're there for the entertainment of seeing him bully somebody. And if that doesn't happen, then they're not entertained anymore. But what will happen, and you've got to bear this in mind, a lot of people say, especially jiu-jitsu people, take him to the ground and pound or, put him in an armbar and all that. That's all very well when you're on the mat and there's only you and the other guy. As I said, one guy on their own, there's never any problem. But if he's playing to an audience and you take him to the ground, what's going to happen is the audience are all going to jump in and you're going to end up getting kicked. You're going to end up getting beat on. All right? So you got to learn how to do it standing up. And basically that's what we try to do with karate. We do have throws involved, joint manipulations involved, but definitely I wouldn't do that if it was more than one-on-one. If it's more than one-on-one and you can't get out of it, you got to take out that bully as fast and as hard as you can and look for repercussions quickly, or run away. And that's where the adrenaline will help you. I mean, you're probably going to be 6 blocks down the road with your back against the wall and your heart pounding about 220. Okay, that's adrenaline doing that for you. Okay, some people, as I say, get addicted to it. Some don't. It's like competition. Some people love competition and they really miss it when they get too old to do it. I know I do, but it's only competition. It was never something that really got my blood up as much as a real street fight or confrontation. And as I say, I've been in a few, and I've been attacked by more than one person at a time. So, yeah, you can handle it. But the other thing you've got to really remember is you're never, ever going to get away, probably, without being hit. So it's not, being hit shouldn't stop you, all right? It's what you do when you get hit that makes the world of difference between whether you're going to walk away or whether you're going to end up on the ground or in a hospital. So getting hit is no big deal. Now, I've been in karate clubs and I've given seminars and I've been teaching at different venues around the world. And some people are actually shocked when you touch them. You just throw a punch and you stop it on the chin. Something that I do every day. I know my distance. I've got good distance. I've got good control. I've been doing it a long time. I'll stop a punch right on the chin and they'll go, oh, you hit me. And they're so shocked. And I'm thinking, man, you are not going to make it. Because when you do get hit, for real, that's not something you can do. You've got to use that to switch. You've got to use it to switch on even faster than you think you can. Because once somebody hits you and you are shocked, kind of drop your defenses, they're just going to keep coming and you're done for. So just bear in mind, like no boxer ever goes into the ring thinking that he's not going to get a punch, even if he's a favourite. Even Mike Tyson, he got punched a few times. Muhammad Ali, of course they got punched. All right? You're not going to get into a serious fight and not get hit. Keep that in mind. Now, if you don't want to get hit, then, look for alternatives. Run away if you can. If you can't, then you got to go at it as fast and as hard as you can. You got to switch on, get that mindset. It's either him or you, and utilize it. All right? So when you're doing dojo training, and I always tell my students this, and I know a lot of instructors do, if you're not trying your best when you're doing, say, Ippon Kumite, which is very, very basic Kumite, right? Just go no sen, block and receive, block and counter, go no sen. Basically, you're receiving it. So you know what's coming. But a lot of people, they just can't handle that, somebody coming at them full speed. Most of the time, you have in the dojo what's called, what I call anyway, a passive aggressor. That the guy who's attacking is actually quite passive. He doesn't mean it, right? Which is absolutely useless for both of you. One guy's going to go home thinking he knows how to punch and deliver a technique, and the other guy's going to go home thinking, oh, I know how to deal with that. I can block that technique. Unless you're going at your absolute top speed with full intention to prosecute the technique fully, then you're not doing you or your partner any good whatsoever. You have to try your best so that he can be his best and really go at it. I know a lot of instructors will tell you that, some won't, okay? The guys that won't are usually the ones that are making money off it. Oh, don't hate each other and, come back next week and make sure you pay your dues. A good instructor will tell you, always try your best, whether you're attacking or whether you're defending. You got to go in fast. And I take Ippon Kumite to different levels sometimes with multiple techniques. I remember one of the favorites, and you could tell the people who are keen on karate, going down to the States comes to mind, or over in Hungary a couple of times, and we do a lineup. Now, if you know a lineup, you've seen lineups. You got a bunch of guys in line, one guy defending, he's blocking and countering, and they're all trying to hit him. So that's okay because they're only doing a single attack. So I'd vary it. I go 5. You do 5 attacks, right? And man, does it ever change the scene. You figure out whether your technique's going to hold up or it's going to deteriorate so much that you're going to end up getting nailed or whatever, but you really brings your level up. So you get 5 attacks coming at you with each guy in the lineup. It just changes your whole attitude to whether you can handle it or whether you can't. The real serious guys just love it. They just love it. And they wouldn't just come up and go 5. They'd shout out, yell out, 5, and go. And that's the way to do it. I mean, you got to make it as close as you can to what you'd expect if you have to use it. Because whether you look on karate as a sport or a lifelong study or a recreation, whatever you're looking at it as, basically it's a method of self-defense. And sometimes self-defense means hitting the other guy first, but it's supposed to be a method of self-defense. Now, a lot of these guys you see jumping all around the place, going into tournaments, like WKF tournaments, and I've got some local tournaments here that I just say to the students, don't bother going. I mean, I won't stop them going. We always put out all the paperwork and go, these are the tournaments that are coming up. If you want to go, it's up to you. Generally, they'll come back and they'll go, well, that was rubbish. And they're right, There are tournaments where kids are punching a bag or punching, one of those bob mannequins on the floor, and they're getting flag system as who punches the mannequin the hardest, which is, it's kind of stupid, And you're teaching people this kind of stuff. It just doesn't work, all right? It's never going to work. And you say, oh, well, they're kids and we're leading them in. No, I run a tournament, and you can enter any age you like, and they all do kumite. They all do ippon shobu. And this is how it works, okay? You're not going to get killed. We have far fewer injuries than any WKF tournaments around. And we've been running the same tournament. It's done 44 years. We missed one in COVID. But we got another one coming up in a couple of months. And it's all going to be shobu ippon, old-fashioned basic rules. You want to score, you got to touch. Not hit, touch. And it works. It absolutely works. Okay, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But if you're going to be in karate, then for God's sake, be in karate and don't be a wuss. Okay. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Have a think about it and let me have your comments as usual. Take care.